And any of you want to go to Oxford and Cambridge? I'll tell you how to do it. Very simple. I have to read your SOP, of course, first, but I'll tell you it's very easy. You choose a topic, very important. Gender, oppression in India. Human rights, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, Northeast. Then they'll say, ये आदमी बहुत serious researcher है, you have a good chance.
And when Kennedy finds कि क्यूबा में जब सैटेलाइट से उसका इमेज आता है कि हमारे बिल्कुल बगल के देश के अंदर न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स हैं, तो डिसीजन व्हाइट हाउस में नहीं होता है, डिसीजन वॉशिंगटन के एक बहुत ही पॉश एरिया में, दिस इज रिकॉर्डेड एविडेंस, लॉन्गेस्ट सर्विंग CIA डायरेक्टर इनके घर पे जाकर के पार्टी के अंदर डिसीजन होता है.
A very warm welcome to all our participants today. I am extremely excited to be sitting amongst our eminent panelists today. So without further ado, and taking away the time from our main speakers, I will make a brief introduction of our topic today, the destructive role of deep state. So I would like to invite Professor Gautam Sen to enlighten us as to what these forces are and how they are operating and shaping our modern world.
Namaste and good afternoon, because I think we are now in the afternoon. I actually have been associated with the BJP. I was a founding member of the Overseas Friends in 1994. So that's where I come from. I was their spokesperson. I worked briefly with Atulji and even our incumbent Prime Minister a while ago. So I am on the whole a political loyalist. I am also a critic because I don't depend on anybody to put food on my table. So I'm also able to be critical. Now, on the issue of what is a deep state, the person introducing the topic has already explained to you that it comprises the kind of enduring establishment, bureaucracy, military, intelligence, but also, some worthy former politicians and senior academics. Certainly in the UK and America, there are very important academics in Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, who are part of the deep state, who are consulted before action is taken. So it is quite a wide network of individuals who constitute the deep state. What is distinctive about the deep state as compared with the political class is the deep state embodies continuity. Politicians may come and go, but there's a high degree of stability in how the deep state perceives the place of their society in the world and how it operates. So continuity in the deep state is very important, because you should then consider how the great disruptor and his team, which has just won the White House, will be able to operate. Will he? Many of us are hoping it will ease matters for our Indian policymakers, and I hope so too, but I have my doubts as to the extent to which the enormous change, and there are some serious people who are good at causing disruption, unprecedentedly now in the White House. So maybe they will make a go of dealing with the bureaucracy. Now, they actually have a reason for being upset with the bureaucracy. They feel the bureaucracy and the way it operated over many, many years, in fact decades, has led to the downfall of the United States, at least as an economy. That the self-interest of these people are inimical to the dynamic advance of their society. And I think there is some truth in this, because all bureaucracy after a while, and certainly we see this in this country, they are much more interested in protecting their own space than looking for dynamic change. So this is the deep state of the United States, the only deep state of great significance. Then there are deep states in NATO countries. Deep state in NATO countries, ऐसा बड़े छोटे भाई है of the big deep state in Washington and elsewhere. And we have now discovered this unambiguously during the war in Ukraine. All these countries have done what they've been told by Washington. Regardless of the consequences for themselves, Germans have destroyed their manufacturing base. The United Kingdom is impoverished and nearly bankrupt, because they have been doing what they're told. And even the Japanese, everybody has basically turned the US line for a war which seems to be completely crazy. Because A, you're not going to win it, and B, the cost of trying is too high. And of course, in the process, there is no Ukraine. The Ukrainian people have been destroyed, literally, because either a disproportionate number of them are dead, or an even larger number have fled the country, and they're not coming back. So this is the deep state which really matters. Do other people have deep states? Yes. Other countries have deep states. Nigeria, Argentina, India. But the distinctive feature of the deep state elsewhere is that their deep state is controlled by somebody else's deep state. Latin American deep states are ultimately the military dictatorships, and they are controlled from Washington. Nigeria now has broken a little bit free. We pride ourselves as being autonomous, and in some respects, while they're recalcitrants and determined people like Prabhat Shukla making policy, we have a fighting chance of retaining a degree of freedom. And though I am not from the bureaucracy, and I like to be critical of them, say horrible things, I have had the good fortune of meeting a lot of outstanding bureaucrats. So do not write off our bureaucracy. There are a lot of serious, good people. So yes, there are underlying issues with the way the bureaucracy works as a system, the operational protocols and all that, but we have a lot of good people. And that is why we have survived at all. If you think we have survived, and we have in some regards, what is it about us that the big deep state does not like and has never liked? We have pretensions to strategic autonomy. जो हमें करना है, मैं सोच के करूँगा. And this has been true in varying degrees throughout. Of course, after 62, Nehru was in his knees begging John F. Kennedy, "Aap kuch kijiye," and all that. Before that, he was talking to a lady in London, a member of the nobility, asking for her advice and discussing the defense budget with her, a lady called Edwina. That's all on the record, by the way. It's not being invented, all on the record. So wo sab tha, and our first two chiefs of staff were British. The head of the Navy was British. So thora garbar tha wahan pe. Because these people cannot be totally loyal to India, given where they come from and where they will be collecting their pension and living. Indira Gandhi, for all her metaphors, right? The way she failed to look after Indian interests after winning the war. There were reasons, and sound reasons, but she should have been belligerent and asserted Indian interests. I won't go into why she did what she did, because there were reasons. And then she gave us this gift of Khalistan. It was really her doing that put us in this soup. But even in 2013, when the man whom I do not like was Prime Minister, we were able to tell the Americans who told us, do not buy Iranian oil. We told them, we will obey the injunctions of the UN Security Council, but not your private ones. Now, that impressed me. We actually told them this. Later on, of course, they put the gun to our head and we complied. We stopped buying Iranian oil. So we have had this pretension of doing our own thing. And it is to our great credit that through poverty, PL 480 and everything else, we have been fighting always. And for this, we should all be proud. अच्छा से नहीं किया हम लोग. बहुत बार हार भी गए. But we have fought, and this is unique to India. Think of countries all over the world. India is unique in having attempted to assert, and in many respects, succeeded in asserting its autonomy. आपको क्या कहे? This man whom I have enormous respect for, इसको ये बंदा कह सकते हैं, ये तो थोड़ा ज़्यादा ही कर दिया. He says, I will do only my thing. And I will smile sweetly and I'll slap your back, but I will do my own thing. This is Narendra Modi. And that is why they do not like him. उसके खिलाफ कुछ भी कहो, and he has actually turned out to be a very smart operator internationally. And this I knew from way before he became Prime Minister or Chief Minister. He had been in action in Washington, and the ambassador there said how he operated in Washington to get sanctions against Pakistan by going to the right people and discussing with them. So he has form in foreign policy making. It's just a natural. He actually has a pretty good team. I like the people around him. They're clever and they're capable of being mean. which is exactly what we need. This is why they have been attempting regime change in India. Farmers' dispute, Delhi riots, Bangladesh. These are all aimed against us. Now, of course, there's been a sudden shift in the last 1 week. Let's wait and see. So they have been trying to pressurize us. And the one lever they have never given up, and they will never give up, is Pakistan. Pakistan is too useful a lever. Low cost. Now it is not low cost anymore, because the generals have made a royal mess of the economy, and I have written about this as to why they will never get out of it. They will never get out of it. And I've written a long article in the Sunday Guardian explaining why. But okay, Pakistan is too useful. It also has a geopolitical location of great strategic importance. Initially, they used to use this as a base to spy on the Soviet Union. Then they thought this is a good way of constraining the Indians. Many years ago, an Indian High Commissioner came to have dinner at my place, and he said, I can only meet the Taiwanese rep as a guest in your house, because if I meet him and the Chinese find out, they will turn on the Pakistani tap, quote unquote. They'll turn on the Pakistani tap. So what is this business of the two deep states, China and the US? In my view, they cooperate against India. They both want to do us in. And I think this Adani Hindenburg scam had a role for both countries. But these enemies, how come they're doing this? Arey bhai, it's very simple. Before they can get their goals, they've got to get rid of Narendra Modi and the regime. Before they can entertain their dreams, they have to get rid of them first. So by cooperating, they're creating the precondition that each party believes that I will come out ahead, that I will be the one who end up in the driving seat, both countries. If I had to guess who will come out ahead, I would have thought, all said and done, the Americans are likely to come out ahead. Because we've seen how quickly they've been pushing the Chinese out of Pakistan, or at least curtailing them. But don't forget, the Chinese have money and lots of it. And that is a critical factor in how many people you can buy. And they've been buying people all over the place, including countless journalists in Delhi and elsewhere in India. So how does this deep state impact us? This is where my views are that of an outlier. And you will think, he's got long in the tooth. Maybe. First, I've been an academic all my life. I taught in one of the world's leading universities, big department. I ran the master's program. I went to Whitehall to seminars. It was not because I was a genius. Circumstances allowed me to study, research, and understand. I've also done research in Washington. The one thing we are unable to grasp, and all my educated friends with big jobs in Cornell and Harvard, they will not grasp, is that the United States and the Western countries operate as a single system across society. Everything is interconnected. Universities, departments, bureaucracies. It is not as if they're having a conversation every day saying, ye karo. It's not like that. The people at the top more or less know which direction to go in, and occasionally they'll have a chat. Hey, Bill, what do you think about this? Hey, Bill, what do you think? Aise baatein hoga. Then they meet in the clubs in London. These clubs in this society, which is now so egalitarian, is not open to Kale Aadmi like me. They are not open to us, even if you could afford to join. This is for Gore. Now, their bigger problem now is that women are joining, so they're very unsettled. Now, women have been allowed to join. So they meet in these clubs. They date each other's girlfriends' wives. They marry each other. So they're all a synthetic one class. Top academics, intelligence officers, and many of the top academics became intelligence officers. So this is a whole. And as that great man who I revere much, Dilip Chakrabarty, archaeologist, Cambridge, he says the weak link in all these universities, he said to me the other day, are these India studies departments. So aap paise kharch karke bidesh gaya, don't waste your money doing India studies there. You want to be brainwashed, stay in JNU. Don't spend 60,000 pounds to get brainwashed in Oxford or Cambridge. Yahan pe you can do it for much less money and put the rest in a mutual fund. You'll retire at 50. So they are all working together. And any of you want to go to Oxford and Cambridge? I'll tell you how to do it. Very simple. I have to read your SOP, of course, first, but I'll tell you it's very easy. You choose a topic, very important. Gender, oppression in India. Human rights, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, Northeast. Then they'll say, yeah, aadmi bahut serious researcher hai. You have a good chance. You do research in all these areas. There's one woman whose father died fighting the Pakistan. She says, Pakistan didn't kill my father. War killed my father. And she is a dear friend of Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel laureate. They are very close to each other. So all this is a racket. All of social science abroad is a racket. Some are bigger rackets than others, but it's a racket. And India studies is one big racket. All the people I know in Oxford, they're all authority on caste. They will never let caste die. They want to make sure that the first book on your reading list is on caste. So that you always remember caste is a big deal. Let's forget about the history of caste. At this moment, they want to make sure that caste consciousness amongst the educated remains upfront. All of them work on caste. Then there's a woman in LSE with whom I had a bitter debate. No, sorry, Oxford, professor of anthropology, on the CAA. Sab gali diya. They were not willing to engage with the simple fact that we are talking about a very small number of people who came before 2009 and had stayed in India for 5 years and who were bewafas, could not access any services. Children couldn't go to school, hospitals. I think it was 32,000. The number was 32,000. That's it. And anybody who came after that would have to go through the standard procedure. And then, of course, we pointed out Pakistanis can apply for political asylum, and we have granted political asylum to small numbers. They said, what about their Ahmadiyyas? What about their Shias? Excuse me, they were in the forefront of partition. Forefront, right? And secondly, as, God, what's his name, the great lawyer in London, who does all the government cases, as he said, these religious issues are their internal problem, not our problem, right? So why should we worry about Ahmadiyyas? Because whenever there is a trouble with India, they are all united. India ke khilaf sab ek saath ho jate hain. But we are supposed to look after them and bring them to our country. Of course, this is official AAP policy. Never mind about that. So first of all, we have no control over our narrative. Academic books, courses are all emanating from faculties from Pennsylvania to Harvard to Oxbridge. And it's a wonderful system. There's a book which, if you haven't read, don't read. Just read my review of it. My review is 13,500 words. It's by Joya Chatterjee, late of Cambridge. She's written a book on India, a disgracefully scurrilous, hostile book, cursing the Indian army, our culture, everything. It's well written. And she lives in Delhi, by the way. Maybe I should give you her phone number so you can talk to her. She lives in Delhi with her boyfriend, Anil Seal, who was her supervisor. And it's a great big book. And the only interesting thing about the book is that she's obsessed with Bollywood films, you see. And that part actually was quite interesting. But I wrote a 13,500 word review in first post. It died like a stone. See, you people don't read. Attempting to destroy the book line by line. Now look what's happened. The prestigious History Prize, the Wolfson Prize, has listed her book as one of the people who might win. The other one is by Nandini Das from Oxford, who's written a book about the first British diplomat in the court of Jahangir. I bought that book thinking it'll be interesting, but actually after the first 50 pages, I felt I was not gathering any new information. But it's a good book. Nandini Das has written a good book on the Mughal court. But Joya Chatterjee's book is nasty. But they are going to, I'm almost certain, give her the Wolfson Prize because this means massive publicity. Giving India Gali. And today I read the Indian Labour Friends of India from the UK, long article about how we should sign a free trade treaty with them. So the whole narrative that they have seized is deeply, deeply inimical. Our consciousness is not our own. Our consciousness, our understanding, our factual information, none of this is our own. I would say 95% comes from abroad, and I'm afraid on the whole, we have shown ourselves to be clueless on how to tackle it. Not that it cannot be done. I can find you 6 people in Delhi itself of high competence, of global reputation, who could rewrite the school history curriculum in 3 months. All of these people, you know, Meenakshi, Vikram, Sanjeev, sabke naam pata hai aapko. Hasn't happened. If you had educated these children when they were 17, 18, you would have a new generation of voters 10 times. 10 groups out of school who would have been more thoughtful about the country that they live in. I'm not saying brainwashed, but had a more thoughtful perspective. So let me conclude by saying this. The bottom line is, what do you want? What do you want? I would say any sensible person living in any country would want 2 things: your territorial integrity and civil peace. By civil peace, I don't mean absence of any conflict like Manipur. By civil peace, I mean you don't have the English Civil War and the American Civil War where your society is destroyed. And if you read about the American Civil War or the British Civil War, you will know this is one thing we do not want in our country. But our great opposition leader goes to the United States, says, we want your help to restore democracy. And one very distinguished defense writer in Delhi has said, the United States went to Iraq to overthrow Saddam to bring democracy. C. Raja Mohan. I say this without comment. Now, so territorial integrity is important for a very simple reason. Once you concede the principle that is not important, then the only question that remains is, how much territory do you give up? The fact that we lost Aksai Chin is neither here nor there, because we have never accepted that. And we always harbor the expectation one day we will reclaim, because that was part of the Kingdom of Kashmir, right? So if you concede the principle of territorial integrity not being important, you have a lot of problems. So it's the first thing, that we will not concede. Secondly, civil peace. And these people who want the Americans here, please look at what's happened to Iraq. Look at what's happened to Syria. Look at what's happened to Libya. Even look at what happened to Tunisia and Egypt. Our country is wonderful, peaceful for all its many problems that you and I know. And that is to the credit of the ordinary people of this country. I was thinking, how can we survive? And ultimately, you know, it occurs to me, because we are not instinctively angry and enraged, wanting to commit murder. Our view is, theek hai, chalta hai. So in a way, collectively, we are able to navigate without letting it rip. So this is the great strength of our civilization and our culture. And I hope you will be skeptical about anything thrown at you about our country. And I hope you will be the ones to build the new India that is coming together. And you have 15 years. After, you will face demographic checkmate. 15 saal ke baad, there will be demographic checkmate. You have 15 years. Thank you.
So without further ado, I'll invite Ambassador Prabhat Shukla ji.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a PPT. I'll rush through it as quickly as I can. Right. Now, you know, actually, I regard the issue not as one of the deep state. It's actually a hydra-headed kind of organization for which I prefer to use the term globalists. I'll come to that in some detail in a minute, where you'll see actually what happened was that once the Cold War ended, there was this question before the American elites in the first place, but others as well. How do we refashion the world around us? Now, Huntington was one of those who came up with this hypothesis of a clash of civilizations, and that is what I will weave into the narrative of the deep state or the globalists. I use the term globalists, but it means deep state. Now he mentions 7 civilizations and Africa as a possibly 8th. You can see the names here. I suppose the principal ones would be Hinduism, Confucianism, Islam, Western Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. Really what we are seeing is an interplay between these. And he posits a future, which is now actually what we are seeing now, a Confucian-Islamic connection. I'll detail this in a minute. Now, of course, there was a very strong opposition, as one could expect, but actually, I had the pleasure of receiving Samuel Huntington in my office when he was visiting India. And what we are seeing is that the conflict is certainly taking shape between the Western Christianity with some of the allies, and mainly a China-Islam connection. One caveat is that you see that it's not homogeneous. It's important to realize that there are differences within civilizations, and of course we see it very clearly in our country. Also that civilizations are also evolving. Particularly I would mention the changes taking place in Saudi Arabia, which are a very clear indication of a certain sense that you need to a more moderate form of Islam in order to get on with the rest of the world. Now here is what Huntington said, the last point, that the globalists are an elite tribe with little need for national loyalty, seeing national borders as obstacles that are fortunately disappearing, and national governments as residues of the past. This is the key to the kind of thing that we are discussing today, the concept of breaking India. Because India is one of the most important of the nationalist centers in the world, and a rapidly growing center, both economically, civilizationally, and militarily. Therefore, we are under particular pressure from the globalist elite. Now, it began as a healthy move to integrate the world or the individual national economies in a production chain. But over time, and especially after the mid-1990s, we are looking really at the administration of President Bill Clinton. That is where the globalist elite started to coalesce. And you had this spate of new organizations coming up, like the International Criminal Court, the WTO, and WHO taking on a new role, which we saw in spades during the Wuhan virus pandemic, when they actually mandated what the entire world was required to do. So that is where, and of course, we have this climate change consensus which is being developed all the time. Happily, in the current one in Baku, the host himself has rubbished the whole idea, but it is generally, again, a supranational move. So that is part one of how they are moving, the globalists, by moving to supranational organizations, which will then dictate to individual national governments how they need to proceed. Things began to change after 2008, when we saw both a coalition of the globalists and a pushback from the nationalists. This is the clash that we are actually now witnessing today. And this is why India is also part of this fast-growing global economy, and our role is becoming increasingly important and being increasingly realized as of increasing importance for the counterweight to the globalist deep state elite. And this actually became very evident after President Trump's victory in 2016 and his open attack on China and the term the globalists. He actually started using the very same term. And we'll come to this in some greater detail as to what exactly is their program of action. Attack on the, I've talked about this already. So I think we can skip these. I've mentioned the internal divisions among the different civilizations and how the nationalist move by Donald Trump, which happily coincided with our own nationalist assertion. This is a very important point to remember, that even a newspaper like The Guardian, which is no friend of India, no friend of the Hindus, even they said after Narendra Bhai Modi won the election in 2014, that it is today that British rule has really ended in India. It's a remarkable statement, absolutely true, and that's why it puzzled me that a rag like The Guardian would even say such a thing. I didn't believe it. I went to the archives and found indeed it is true. They actually did say that. So, and you see what the kind of pressure that our leader has been under all over the world. There's religious freedom and intolerance and all sorts of other things, caste violence, which Professor Sen has already elaborated in greater detail. All this is a function of the desire to crush the nationalist forces and establish the unchallengeable supremacy of the globalist elite. Right. Now, this is something on which I would like to spend a little time. This is how the globalist elites actually function. What are they doing? I've already mentioned one strand, which is to go supranational. So you have all those organizations that I just described. The second part is to destroy the nation state. And you begin by destroying the nation state in this manner. Free and easy divorce to destroy the family. Homosexuality to destroy reproduction. We'll come in a minute to how important demography and population is. Human rights, this is to overcome state sovereignty. Environmental control, with this they are gaining control over our economic power and our economic sovereignty. An education system, I hope you guys are all above this, but be on your guard against this. An education system that cripples the mental faculties of the children, distances themselves from their parents, and denigrates their own culture. Unfortunately, this is true of India too, not as badly as in America, but it is happening in India too. A medical system that enforces gender fluidity. And the aim is to create what the Chinese leader called sissy boys. And they are wise to this trick. And so he has spoken out openly against this emergence of this creature called the sissy boys. And that's partly what we are seeing in many parts of the world. Hatred for religions. All Indic religions are under unprecedented attack, especially the Sanatan Dharma, and of course Judaism and Christianity. And I think there is scope here for us to at least coordinate positions. The role of the NGOs, and this is to transmit private sector power through funding on government and frequently in opposition to government policies. And multiculturalism is aimed at destroying a nation's civilizational roots. This is where the destruction of the nation states happens. You combine all this and you see it's happening in pretty much most of the democracies around the world, and India is no exception there. India is also in the crosshairs. You see, like I'm saying here, every Holi, you hear these kids going around saying, this year say no to colors. Every Diwali, say, this year say no to crackers. And of course, you know, you speak your own language, somehow people look down on you. You go to any five-star hotel and you speak Hindi, even they look down on you. I encountered this in Russia also, by the way. I'd go there and speak in Russian, and they would treat me like, you know, any riffraff. I speak in English, they don't understand a word, but they say, okay, this guy is something serious. We need statecraft. You know, just before we gathered here, someone asked me about this. Why do we lack statecraft? And I said, really, it's our history. 1,000 years of subjugation will leave its impact. But for heaven's sake, I think we need an education system which can now start to overcome this. An effort is being made, but I don't think enough is being done. And like Professor Sen pointed out, surely we need to change our education curriculum. It's 10 years of this government, and it hasn't yet happened, but one lives in hope. We have seen the principal contradiction, and the globalists, unfortunately, which is the deep state, this is the kind of control that they have. Public space, media, including social media, big business, universities, films, and of course the international organs. And they have come up with this new term called illiberal democracy. When they don't like the nationalist policies of any leader, and it's not just India. You can see they're doing this to President Milei in Argentina, Prime Minister Orban of Hungary. All of them are being described as illiberal democracies. And I think what we have to do is simply push back and say, yes, if you want the other things that I mentioned, the destruction of your own civilizational ethos, then we'll be happier to be illiberal than to go your way. Briefly, I'll just say that the important thing is to focus on some of the key issues that face our country. Economics is the first one. We have to maintain and increase our rate of growth. We need to spend more on our defense, and we need to be able to apply pressure, military, economic, and gray zone pressure. These are skills that we need to acquire. That's part of statecraft. And here are some of the other things that I think our country would do well to work upon. And of course, I'd say probably over here the most important is to overcome our internal divisions. Social cohesion within India is a very serious challenge, but it must be faced and it must be overcome. Money, of course, is what runs the world. And happily for us, we are now in a good position. And it's my view that it's time for us to do something with, we are sitting on $700 billion of foreign exchange reserves. I think it's time for us to form, like many other countries have done, a sovereign wealth fund, because a sovereign wealth fund can do things which the Reserve Bank of India cannot do. In short, they can buy up newspapers, influence universities, make films, fund films. You know how China is gaining influence in terms of its soft power is exactly through this. Why you notice in Hollywood, for example, there's that famous film Top Gun or something, I think it's called, where once they showed the flag of Taiwan and the Chinese wouldn't allow the film to come into India, into China. And then they caved. The Hollywood people caved, they removed the Taiwan flag, and the film was allowed to get into China, and it made a lot of money. They are also funding the studios. And that's the sort of thing which a sovereign wealth fund can do, which the Reserve Bank cannot do. And of course, we have to, this last one is very important for me. We need to contain foreign inflows. Foreign money is playing a very dangerous role, very destructive role in India. Many of our NGOs are funded with foreign money, and most of them working in violation of the FCRA, and we need to tighten the rules of the FCRA. And a lot of money is also coming in cash through Hawala, and for that we need to be willing to demonetize even the 500 rupee note. We've done that with the 2000 rupee note. I think we should also do it with the 500 rupee note if it continues. Now I've put all this in capitals because this is it. Demography is destiny. And our demography is going absolutely awry at the moment. Whatever it takes, it has to be controlled. And I think some proposals like the Uniform Civil Code, population control, removal of illegal immigrants is an absolute and pressing necessity. I find actually that if you read the population reports or the climate change reports of the IPCC, they do mention population as one of the factors, one of the important factors responsible for global warming. So I believe we can use climate control in order to emphasize the necessity in India for demographic control. Without this, everything else will come to naught. This is the real core of the challenge that we face today. The world is not one family. I'm sorry, I'm going against the trend of our messaging of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but it really is not, and we need to be aware. If you ask me, I don't think Winston Churchill or Osama bin Laden or Hafiz Saeed are part of my family. I certainly don't want to belong to their family. Yeah, so well, this is really coming to the end. We just have some challenges to face within our country. And it seems to me that the BJP needs to make some smart choices as far as alliances are concerned. I believe they lost UP because they did not make the right alliance with the BSP, and they were faced with a combine of the Congress and the Samajwadis. And if you look at the percentages, if the two had combined BJP and BSP, they would have been at 50%. As it is, they were level with the combine of the Congress and Samajwadi, and they lost 30 seats. Otherwise, they would have had a clear majority all over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. That was indeed very enlightening. Now I would like to invite Shri Karan Kataria ji to present his views.
I think majority of things have been covered by Professor Sen and Ambassador Shukla. So whatever little is left with me, I'll try to pass it on in simple terms and terminologies, considering you all are from various backgrounds, streams, and not using more of technical terms. To begin with, deep state is an unelected body, individual or an organization जो लोकतंत्र के या चुनाव की प्रक्रिया से चुन करके डिसीजन नहीं लेते, उनको डिफाइन कर सकते हैं कि वो डीप स्टेट है. टू एग्जेम्प्लीफाई, टू गिव अ केस इन पॉइंट, उदाहरण हेतु कैरेबियन क्राइसिस हुए थे. क्यूबा एक देश है. जब अमेरिका और सोवियत यूनियन के बीच में टसल थी, अमेरिका had its nuclear weapons in Italy. Soviet Union, replying to the very action of America, stationed it near America, Cuba के अंदर. And when Kennedy finds कि क्यूबा में जब सैटेलाइट से उसका इमेज आता है कि हमारे बिल्कुल बगल के देश के अंदर न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स हैं, तो डिसीजन व्हाइट हाउस में नहीं होता है. डिसीजन वॉशिंगटन के एक बहुत ही पॉश एरिया में. दिस इज रिकॉर्डेड एविडेंस दैट केनेडी goes to the Joseph Alsop, William Koibe, Chip Bolin and Ellen Dulles, who was the longest serving CIA director. इनके घर पे जाकर के पार्टी के अंदर डिसीजन होता है by these unelected man, and Kennedy, the serving president, whether what action to be taken is not decided within the very elected representative and the council, but at the house party of these very individuals, one among which is a columnist, CIA, FBI, and all these unelected individuals. So the point I'm trying to make by giving this example is unelected individuals having power. Now, to begin further, we need to understand the philosophical, historical, and theoretical underpinnings as to the very origin of these the concept of the intelligence or the CIA that we took a case in point. So Roosevelt was the president, and Dwight Donovan was the individual who was first appointed to the director of Office of Strategic Services. CIA से पहले Office of Strategic Services का director इसको appoint किया गया. Harry Truman, who was then serving president, signs the existence of this OSS, and he himself says कि अब क्योंकि spying करना is a wartime thing. युद्ध समाप्त हुआ तो उसको it's no more required. So therefore जिस president ने उसको origin दिया, he himself signed the document that we no longer need this OSS, Office of Strategic Services. But it's very hard to ask the gin to go back in the bottle. एक बार जिन को निकाला तो वापस जाना बहुत मुश्किल है. So this very OSS now comes as CIA. And the assassination of President Kennedy, after that, Harry Truman writes in the Washington Post, 1 month later, you can verify it, that we need to dissolve this CIA. I'm not making a claim that it had a role in Kennedy's assassination or not. But point I'm trying to make, the individual who created this Office of Strategic Services now questioning and asking that we no more require this. So you need to understand the amount of personal data they would have, the amount of great secret things they would have, that they want to penetrate into the very system and want things to work according to them. So this is what the system of America works. And Professor Sen started, yesterday I was reading New York Times and the headline was the appointment of Tulsi as national So it's a direct attack on deep state. To understand deep state, we need to understand that these are unelected individuals who are exercising the political power without going through that political system and that election process. Now, we need to understand they do not work in isolation. अपने आप स्वतः काम नहीं करते. Ambassador Shukla have sort of touched upon WHO, those international organizations, that globalization process per se. And he termed Wuhan virus, COVID-19, relating to WHO. So you need to understand these international organizations and what role they play. Now, when I talk about WHO, look at the research, the amount they spend. ट्रॉपिकल डिजीजेस पर रिसर्च पर पैसा खर्च नहीं होता है. रिसर्च होता है व्हाट इज डिजीजेस ऑफ मोर ऑफ व्हाट अफेक्ट्स द वेस्ट. तो वेबसाइट पर जाना, रिसर्च पे किस पर कितना अमाउंट खर्च होता है ये देखना, उसके विभाजन से ध्यान में आएगा कि मोर मनी इज स्पेंड नॉट ऑन द ट्रॉपिकल डिजीजेस बट ऑन द कोल्ड रिलेटेड सॉर्ट ऑफ डिजीजेस. द नेमिंग ऑफ पैंडेमिक्स, अगर अफ्रीका से कुछ होता है तो आप उसको इबोला बोलते हो. एड्स का नेम कैसे होता है, बट यू डू नॉट डेयर टू नेम कोविड एज चाइनीज और वुहान वायरस. सो इवन लुक एट द very psychology of naming virus, the funds to research. और बहुत हमें पता नहीं होगा कि किस खाने के प्रोडक्ट पर पीछे आप पढ़ते हैं. दिस आर द इंग्रेडिएंट्स एंड दीज आर द परसेंटेज ऑफ समथिंग दैट इज एडेड टू दैट प्रोडक्ट. हु डिसाइड्स कितना क्या ऐड हो सकता है या कितना लिमिट है. सो WHO हैज सेवरल सब ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस जिसके अंदर दीज मल्टीनेशनल कॉर्पोरेशंस कम्स एज द ऑब्जर्वर्स एंड दे स्टार्ट सॉर्ट ऑफ पुशिंग देयर थिंग. लंदन में वीगन, पूरा वर्ल्ड में वीगन स्टार्ट हुआ. Now I was going through a case study. It was a time when Bill Gates bought certain farming, wanted to get into this industry, and the entire research started being produced at how veganism is better, how you should. So the point, I'm not sort of debating against or for veganism. The point I'm trying to make, that these multinational corporations, these unelected individuals, work in tandem to push forth their agenda, the agenda which Ambassador Shukla provided. Coming on to the other organization, World Bank. इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड, दोनों बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन। वी एज अ स्टूडेंट यूज्ड टू थिंक सर इंटर्नशिप लगना चाहिए, इधर वर्क करना चाहिए। सो look at go and read not the thin history but the thick history of these organizations. दो लोग, इनको भी when they started there was an entire history attached to these two individuals, Keynes and White. इन दोनों लोगों ने अमेरिका और यूनाइटेड किंगडम से थे, और किस प्रकार से पूरा you have the sort of discussions as to वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 के बाद यूरोप की इकोनॉमी, अमेरिका की इकोनॉमी, एक रिसेशन आएगा तो उस रिसेशन को कैसे केटर करना है, हाउ टू रिकंस्ट्रक्ट एंड रीडेवलप द यूरोप, कीपिंग दैट थिंग इन माइंड, द इंटरनेशनल बैंक फॉर रिकंसिलिएशन एंड डेवलपमेंट, which we casually say it World Bank. World Bank is not just a bank, it is a group of various organizations. ICSID is one, MEGA is one. So all of these these are 5 different organizations that support and work. Originally इनका mandate क्या था? Mandate था World War II के बाद चीजों को ठीक करना, but they shifted into policy intervention. How? इनका black and white, I'm not talking about what I read or what I interpret. Go to their articles of agreement. Articles of agreement, World Bank की website पर जाइएगा और just go through it, and they mention that their aim is to promote privatization, private capital in the market. अब private capital promote करना है तो जो approach एक what East India Company did, it wanted to promote private investment. So that approach is being shifted to the ideology of development. I always say the words have a lot of power. So you might do something which is completely not ethical, but still you present it that as if you are doing it for the betterment of the society. Railways was constructed by Britishers in India. Some scholarship and literature argue it brought in development, but that was not the purpose of development. That was to promote the capital, to promote the private investment. आपको development करना है, तो World Bank का भी agreement, articles of agreement says the same thing. और mandate कैसे बदलता है? एक और एग्जाम्पल देता हूं, रॉबर्ट मैकनामारा वियतनामीज वॉर में बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट व्यक्ति था। जब अमेरिका का और वियतनाम की वॉर आपने पढ़ा होगा, ही इज अपॉइंटेड टू द एज अ प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ वर्ल्ड बैंक। अब ही अगेन रीएम्फसाइज कि अब न्यू वर्ल्ड में घुसना है, देशों के अंदर जाना है, तो अपना नैरेटिव चेंज करना पड़ेगा। तब वर्ल्ड बैंक ऑल ओवर स्टार्ट्स विद पॉवर्टी एलिवेशन। उसके आर्टिकल्स ऑफ एग्रीमेंट में पॉवर्टी एलिवेशन नहीं है। नाउ यू ओपन इट वेबसाइट, इट टॉक्स अबाउट इट। Read, so these are the ways to intervene. So Robert McNamara is saying, read there are enormous amount of literature being produced wherein he talks about कि world new order में और new world में intervene करना है, तो वो gun diplomacy से या फिर ऐसे नहीं होगा. You have to talk about poverty. You have to talk about the ideology of development. So coining of these terms and moving forth, taking these terms as a umbrella and then pushing up your agenda. Similarly, IMF भी क्या करता है? Surveillance, conditionalities. जो इकोनॉमिक्स के छात्र होंगे, पॉलिटिकल साइंस के छात्र होंगे, they would have read, come through it. पाकिस्तान की recent case study है। इतना डेटा हमारे पास नहीं है, उनका काम नॉलेज प्रोडक्शन का है। यू गो टू IMF वेबसाइट एंड यू सभी कंट्रीज के ऊपर डेटा निकालना है, तो वो काम करते हैं। कुछ करने से पहले पूर्व पक्ष की तैयारी होनी आवश्यक है, तो उस हेतु से उस देश में क्या क्या चल रहा है वो उनको ध्यान में है और उसमें करते भी हैं। 91 का हमारा इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस, उसके लिए 2 रिपोर्ट्स पहले से इन इंस्टीट्यूशंस ने बना करके रखी थी और क्या क्या कदम उनको उठाने हैं तो आईएमएफ का मैंडेट क्या है? आपको बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट का क्राइसिस टेम्पररी मीट कराना। बट उस बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट के क्राइसिस को मीट कराने के लिए, जब आपका क्राइसिस आता है, दे विल गिव यू अ सेट ऑफ कंडीशनैलिटीज कि ये आपको पूरा करना पड़ेगा तो हम लोन देंगे। और लोन एकदम से नहीं मिलता, इट कम्स इन इंस्टॉलमेंट्स। फर्स्ट इंस्टॉलमेंट, देन यू हैव टू डू टेक सर्टेन मेजर्स। और मेजर्स क्या है? वो कॉपी पेस्ट मेजर्स हैं। और कारण क्या है उस इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस का? वो नहीं, सबको कोई बीमारी है तो डॉक्टर बुखार की डोलो सभी को चला देता है, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता। अगर आपको यू हैव अ स्टमक एड, यू नीड अ डिफरेंट मेडिसिन। इफ यू हैव अ बॉडी टेम्परेचर, यू नीड डिफरेंट मेडिसिन। बट व्हाट आईएमएफ एंड वर्ल्ड बैंक डज कि वही प्राइवेट कैपिटल को, तो इसमें यू रीड हाउ इंडोनेशिया, these Asian countries sort of went against World Bank और IMF कि हमें ये नहीं चलेगा. And they said, we won't take loans from you. They said, okay, we'll curtail it according to the specific needs of these countries. So the point I'm trying to make by discussing these, that how they intervene. Who intervene? They're not elected individuals. General Assembly is not electing it. Some specific handful of individuals and countries per se elect them. The Global North elects them. Who is always the president of World Bank? I think majority of times it's always been American citizen. Who is the director for IMF? It's one of the other European nation. So they are controlling your financial policies. They are controlling your entire world economic order. How it is to be controlled, these selective set of individuals are doing it. And they intervene in your policy. They intervene within the system, and that intervention is so smart that they coin what I told about this example of Robert McNamara I gave. Now, you also need to understand, they do not work you might argue or sochna bhi chahiye ki why these individuals sort of ki don't go to private lenders. So private lender के पास ये countries क्यों नहीं जा पाती हैं? Credit rating agencies, Moody's is the one. तो किस country का क्या credit rating है? So ये few selective organizations give that credit rating agencies. और वो किस basis पर देंगी? What IMF rates you. Credit card आपको तभी मिलेगा आपकी credit rating ठीक होगी. वो कौन देता है? Bank देता है. So see the wider picture. What individuals who control such systems, how they control it, and sort of the enormous amount of power these unelected individuals, these multinationals have hold, which aids into changing the very socio-economic and cultural dynamic of a state. India is one. बहुत छोटी-छोटी African countries हैं. Switzerland never produced chocolate, but we all want Swiss की chocolate. Colleges में Switzerland chocolate is एक बीज नहीं होता है स्विट्जरलैंड में कॉफी का. कोकोआ is being sent from Africa. But see the narrative that is being built. So again, the point I'm trying to make is that these individuals, these unelected individuals, how they sort of work within the system, how they penetrate the system, and how it is destructive. What the theme of this panel is, destructive nature of these deep state. And deep state is unelected individuals or these corporations which have enormous influential power that affects. Thank you.
Thank you, Karan sir. That was. I would now like to give mic over to our Professor Gautam Sen, and he would conclude his thoughts in under a minute. Sort of a parting advice for youngsters present here.
3 quick points. First is, in international relations, a weak power will always be a victim of stronger powers. Doesn't matter, all times. And great powers have collapsed, whether it's Turkey, Russia recently. So if you're weak, it's not about morality, they will pay attention to you. And India is still a weak country because it has many internal fissures which can be exploited. So this is the first thing. Second thing, my gut feeling is the only deep state which matters for us as Indians is the American deep state, and it is everywhere. And NGOs are a very important part of the deep state. Do not forget, for example, the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, which was expelled from India, has now an office in London, and it has UK in the bracket. And what is their most critical area? Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So all these NGOs are very suspect. Now, the global state actually is in clash with the national state which came together in the 17th century. And the global state does not want the United States to be less powerful. They want the United States to be powerful, but they want total freedom of operations, manufacturing in China, total financial mobility after 79. So this is an interesting conjuncture, and we, as Prabhat has pointed out, are a national civilization state, which is a problem for them. And we are very, very important. The West cannot fight a war, they have said, without Indian manpower. First thing, Indian manpower is very crucial to fight a major war, perhaps against China. And secondly, the Indian market will only grow and grow in significance, and they're anticipating the future.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for our eminent panelists for enlightening us.